It's Children's Mental Health Week, and we're exploring the power of paying attention to what's going on inside, discovering clues from our thoughts, our feelings, and our bodies. Hello, I'm Kathryn Lovewell, author of The Inner Detective Journal, a gentle guide to help young children make sense of their inner world, especially when life feels difficult. We are shining a light on the importance of children's mental health, so every child has the opportunity to learn skills to respond to themselves kindly when things go wrong, which they inevitably will. So let's hear from one of our special guests now. Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to introduce you to Tem Ezimokhai from Kent, who is a PE secondary school teacher and has been in education since 2009. Yes, she has a ton of experience working with young people. So we're going to look through the lens of a teacher today when it comes to our children's mental health. So Tem, warm welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. As a previous, obviously, in a past life, I too was a secondary school teacher. We know firsthand how important children's mental health is. Can we start with what impacts their mental health? What do you see influencing how they're feeling and how they're coping?
So much. The Obviously the family's at home. So when they come to school, we don't know what's going on at home. We don't know what happened that morning, and they can come in dysregulated. And even at school, the people they come across, their interactions with their friends, that can have a big impact on their mental health. The words that we use as teachers is huge. And I don't think teachers realize enough the impact that our words have on these kids. And that's what scares me the most, I think, in education, because I still hear it today, the language being used around the children, and it just seems like their self-esteem is just being battered daily. And that is leading them to become anxious, become dysregulated, withdrawn, not feeling safe or supported. And it breaks my heart as a teacher, just seeing those kids and the impact that our words as members of staff and how we interact with these children and how that's affecting them. Because it is the words, of course, it's mostly the words, but also how we respond. We don't respond, we react into situations. And these children are not equipped to be able to they don't have the right tools to be able to let us know effectively that they're struggling. So when we react, of course they're going to react. And then we get we react even more and more and more. And the situation spirals. So it just scares me. There's that kids are going through on a day-to-day basis.
There is a lot to unpack there, Tem.
Yes.
Language is a big one for me, but let's start with safety. What does that look like? I mean, when you said, oh, it breaks my heart, I was thinking that it breaks my heart to think that any child doesn't feel safe in school. But I have worked one-to-one with a lot of children that school just isn't. They don't perceive it as a safe environment, and there's lots of reasons why. So let's explore, we know psychological safety is vital. Obviously, we know physical safety is also important. We're going to assume they are safe in school physically. But what's happening with their psychological safety? What might be threatening that?
The noises, the loud noises around them, the hustle and bustle of kids running around, the shouting, unfortunately in the classroom, can trigger them. Some students, especially kids that have come from traumatic backgrounds, can really trigger them, and they just go into flight, fight, or fawn. They will just want to escape or freeze. And just the expectations that we have on them is huge, and that can really trigger a threat to them because they struggle to deal with that. They struggle to deal with those expectations because it's too much for them. They can't cope, especially if they've got low self-esteem themselves and they're shame shielding themselves. That then they can't cope with that. The more that we put on them and we expect of them, the more they're going to regress, the more they're going to struggle, the more they're going to feel like they're unsafe. So they're not going to want to come to school. They don't feel safe in the classrooms because of all these different pressures. Being picked on the lesson, not picked on's the wrong word, and being selected in class in front of everybody to answer a question. That's terrifying for some kids. And if we don't know these children as teachers, if we don't understand the kids in front of us and know what they're dealing with or struggling with even from a day-to-day, that we can inadvertently cause them to become more anxious, cause them to feel even more unsafe. And then when they're walking out lessons and not wanting to return or they're truanting, there's a reason behind that. And we may have inadvertently caused that, unfortunately.
And that that self-concept being threatened, really, isn't it? There's threat everywhere, I think, in our culture now. And in the classroom, you think, no, not at all. But of course, you've named it. Expectation can be perceived as a huge threat, a threat to, am I clever enough? Will I look stupid in front of these people? I know one of my sons, there was quite a lot of bullying in his school for being keen to ask questions. It was the other way. And you think, pardon? Surely that's what learners do. We ask questions. That's growth. That's great. And apparently there was threat going on around, if you did ask a question, that meant you were stupid. No, it means you're learning, surely. So we've got layers upon layers of different types of threat. And I think it's interesting when it comes to expectation, that can destroy a child's mental health really, really quickly if in their own minds they're not meeting their own expectations, or certainly the perceived expectations of others.
100%, because that expectation is a massive threat to them, and they'll see it as a threat. And then, unfortunately, when they're worried about meeting your expectations and they don't meet your expectations, then that just demoralizes them even more, and it affects their self-esteem even more because they can't match those expectations that we have of them, and it's just deteriorates their mental health, and they don't want to come to school, unfortunately. So yeah, we have to be careful as teachers when it comes to expectations, because it's too much of a burden on our children sometimes.
Really is curious, isn't it? Because I learned this the hard way as a mum, that you can have a really high achieving student, and those expectations are the norm because, well, they're, in my day, it was called gifted and talented, but they're very able students. And you'd think an expectation would be raising them up, uplifting them, helping inspire them. But actually, certainly I learnt the hard way as a mum that it was perceived as too much and a threat, too much pressure. It's like, actually, I don't mind if you get an A, B, or C if you're loving what you're doing, or 7, 8, or 9, whatever the schemes are now, the dinosaur in the room. But it's really interesting now we're in this culture of we almost need to be, our young people need to be exceptional at something to be just okay, enough, just enough. And that's got to be, I mean, I can't begin to conceive of how difficult it must be to have that, I know we've moved out of the classroom and into social media, but we've got comparison mind happening in the classroom. We know, I remember, golly, when my children were in primary, they knew what purple table really meant. That's for the ones that were struggling with the reading. They knew. It's never spoken about, but they knew that colour meant that. So they get it really early and really quickly. So by the time they're teens, that's really going to influence how they feel about themselves.
And it's going to affect how they interact with people and how they see the world and their outcomes in life. Just what you said earlier about gifted and talented, those are the kids that end up struggling when it comes to GCSEs and actually end up getting worse grades than they're expected. Because like you said, for so many years, all these expectations, oh, you're an A-star student, you're going to get 9s and 8s and this. But actually, these kids struggle with that expectation. They're thinking, well, what if I can't? What if I can't do that? Like, I don't know how to get an 8 or a 9 in that subject. What if I'm not good enough? And they just regress, unfortunately. And it's the gifted and talented kids miss out on those top grades because they don't know how to handle that high pressure and expectations a lot.
Yes. And of course, we know that fear shuts down the brain. So if they're in a constant state of fear and they are threatening themselves with those expectations, as well as perceiving threat from the expectations, the very well-meaning, we need to name this, well-meaning expectation of really caring, fantastic teachers, really caring, fantastic parents, but it's the perception of what that child is experiencing that then it can implode and create such stress on their self-esteem, their confidence in themselves, their worth, and what we call crusher, that critical voice then expands, gets larger, gets louder, and then that ends up running the show, which is, of course, really going to destroy their confidence and belief in themselves.
And we see that as dysregulation. And then as teachers, we struggle to cope with that in terms of how do we support this student now? They're dysregulated. And unfortunately, we become dysregulated sometimes as teachers. And then a spiral continues. And unfortunately, it escalates for that student. And we need more training. Teachers need more training on how to better support our students when it comes to stress and anxiety and expectations and understanding their perception.
I 100% agree. So let's go back to language then, because I remember learning about neuro-linguistic programming and the power of language many, many years ago. Something as simple as a direction and instruction, if it's used in a negative term, I used to be a lifeguard 100 years ago, and don't run, the mind doesn't hear that. So don't talk, these beautiful brains in the classroom, they're not hearing that. So something as simple as that, if we're not getting that level of training as a trainee teacher, we're going to bump into, by accident, lots of ways that we will not support our children, and the young people's way to understand the world and respond, react situation. So tell me more about language and the things that perhaps we could change and prevent with some more awareness.
I worked in an SEN school for a couple of years, and I think that's helped me a lot with my language. Things
SEN
like,
meaning, just for those who may not be in education.
children with special educational needs. So they've got neurodevelopmental conditions. And there I learned a lot about the words that we use. And instead of saying stop kicking, just say feet down, or stop hitting, hands down, because it's the last word that they're going to remember the most. So if we're going to keep saying stop kicking and stop doing this, they're just going to keep doing those things, and it's not their fault, because we have to change the language that we're using to better support them, so that they actually understand what is expected of them, and being very clear and concise, so that they know exactly what we want them to do, and using simple language. But I think another thing with language that really frustrates me when I hear other teachers saying things, it's like saying to kids that they're being lazy, basically, or you haven't copied off the board yet, you're just being lazy, or you can't be bothered. Labeling them in certain ways that it just exacerbates the problem, just makes it worse, rather than saying, you're obviously struggling with this, so let me help you. You're struggling to get started on this task, so how about we do this instead, rather than labeling them and saying that they're disruptive or lazy or misbehaving or kicking off. And it's all negative language that just leads to kids become dysregulated, and then leads to reactions. Of course it does, because I don't want to be told I'm lazy, or I'm kicking off, or I'm disruptive. I don't want to be told that. It's just how we change the way we speak to kids, we're going to be able to reach them a lot better.
And of course, the energy behind that is actually, it's almost like we need to listen before we speak in a different way. And I just want to caveat all of this coming from, I wrote Every Teacher Matters a long time ago. And I really believe that teachers there's some extraordinary humans with that label of teacher. They're brilliant humans. But if I think we need to just acknowledge and recognize that we are absolutely doing our best. I challenge any person, because I used to have people come to me and say, oh, why are you doing teacher wellbeing? Why, we're stressed at work too. And I would always say to them, so when something difficult comes in, when you have a difficult meeting, when you have maybe a bit of a tense email pop in, or maybe, there's just some tension in the office, what can you do about it? Well, I normally go for a drink, I'll go to the coffee machine, or maybe I'll sit in the bathroom for a bit and, I'll go to the water cooler, or I can just maybe go out for a cigarette. They can leave the difficulty. And I would always remind them, teachers cannot do that. Teachers can't go, actually, you lot are a bit tricky today. Actually, I'm having a really difficult day. You look after yourselves, chaps. I'll be back in half an hour. We can't do that as teachers. So I really wanted to name that, because I don't want, teachers get a bad rap a lot of the time, and there are brilliant human beings in there. But I would also say, how are you doing if you're a parent? How are you doing with, sorry, did you say you had 1 child, 2 children, maybe 3, hey? Okay, times that by 10. Now see how well you manage the needs of 30, sometimes it's 35 now, young people in one space, sometimes for an hour and a half, without them being allowed to get off their chairs, without them, all of the systemic challenges that one human being is expected to hold that level of energy. I know as a parent with my sons, it's like, what? They're so different, and there's a small gap between them. You think, how can this be so hard? So anyway, I just wanted to caveat that if any teachers are watching, this is not anything other than very much a raising awareness about how difficult it is in the system. And yes, I do 100% agree with you. Our teachers need more support. They need more training. They need some extra humans in the space. I mean, gosh, we could we could spend a month going down this road. So coming back to the kids, how do we support them, Tem? How do we've agreed some really good awareness around language, a better environment, some more humans in the room, I think would be really good. But knowing that one human is unlikely to know the nuances of the needs of each child, and depending on the type of school it is, you'll get to learn as much or as little as senior leaders think is appropriate, which is also challenging. Recognizing we're in a system that really needs quite a lot of support, how can we really do our best for these wonderful young humans that are, I think, so inspirational? I love hanging out with these young people. How can we reassure them, support them, uplift them as best we can within the constraints of our teaching environment?
That's a hard question.
I'm sorry, I'm giving you all the toughies tonight.
As a teacher, that's really hard. I was going to say look to ourselves first, because like you said, the system's hard. And then we feel battered, and then it's hard to not react. And so, yeah, we need to be kind to ourselves first so that we can better support the kids. Because if we're not kind to ourselves and we're struggling, our kids are going to struggle. And that's not our fault. We need tools and strategies to help us. But I suppose the biggest thing is just try and come with more empathy. Of course, that's hard again, because when we're stressed out and we're overworked and we're burnt out, that's not easy. Empathy goes out the window. We don't feel empathy anymore when you're in that burnt out state.
That's right.
But it's just trying to come with empathy and trying to listen more and sort of unpick as best we can. But like you said, when we've got 30 kids in the classroom and we've got challenging situations that we have to deal with, we need support. We need support ourselves from senior leaders as well. But yeah, it's just about us trying to be more empathetic to us, to ourselves, and to the kids.
I think you put the nail on the head there, Tem.
Yeah.
Sorry, jumping
That's
in.
right.
And this really is, because unless the adult in the room, whether that's a parent or a social worker, a teacher, whatever environment that child is in, if that adult is not regulated themselves, if their fuse is that short because, and we know lots of reasons why, we can justify that, if they are not taking care of themselves, which we know is very challenging if the expectations on the teacher, which we know are, and all the pressures they're experiencing, then there's no ability for that adult to model what we're wanting to experience from the child and to show them actually self-compassion, for example. Obviously, it's my bag. Self-compassion will absolutely support your ability to learn, your ability to cope, your ability to deal with that mean interaction in the playground, your ability to express yourself, your ability to ask for help. And of course, we need to know what that feels like. We need, as adults in the room, to demonstrate that. And we need to stay steady when there is a storm in the classroom, because we can't, as you say, we can't control what's happened before they walk through the school gates, which can have, I think, a big emotional toll on any adult in the room. It can be heartbreaking, especially when you see that they haven't eaten and they need some clean uniform and they are exhausted. All of those basic fundamentals, when we know their needs are not being met, it's hard to stay steady.
It is. It's really hard. And like you said, these kids are coming from all sorts of backgrounds, and they are going to come with certain perspectives of adults, especially because of their background. That's not their fault. It's just what they've experienced. And yeah, it's about us being understanding towards them and trying our best to support them the best way we can by providing them that safe space where they feel safe in the classroom. But also us asking for help, because like when there are kids coming that have come from really difficult backgrounds, we struggle ourselves and we do need help ourselves to better support those kids, and getting help from our colleagues or senior leaders so that we can put in place the right strategies to support those kids in our lessons, because otherwise the kids aren't going to benefit and we're not going to benefit from the situation. We're going to struggle. It's going to have a massive impact on us, on our emotional well-being, because we've got the weight of all these kids on our shoulders, because they're all coming from different walks of life, and we just want to do the best for those children. And that's really hard. That's really hard on day to day.
We don't want our kids to suffer.
No.
And we think teachers that really care are the ones that do struggle with burnout, that they do take the kids home energetically. And we know that that's not sustainable. And I think this, going back to modeling, how can we model for our young people that we care without taking on that burden, that there are ways to handle difficult, when there is a big fight in the classroom, whatever. Can we stay steady? Can we stand still in that storm? Can we breathe? There's lots of different techniques but can we breathe through that to demonstrate what a calm response actually looks like, even when it can be scary and overwhelming and you've still got another 28 kids to be dealing with. It's challenging, but I do 100% agree with you that there's layers here about how to support a child's mental health. One final question before we go, because I know we need to wrap up. I could obviously talk to you for the rest of the day. But what would you say to an adult if they know a young person is struggling? How would you, what's that first step? How would you invite them to, if they feel out of their depth, they don't really know how to help, they can see that maybe something's a bit off with this child or young person, or they know they're struggling, but they haven't actively really asked for help, but they're in a position where they can make connection. What would you say would be a really good first step to support them and their mental health?
I'd say try and find what that child is interested in. Try and find a shared connection with that child, so that you can find a topic that they're interested in, that you can actually get to know more about, to show that child that you are a trusted adult, but just to make them feel like, oh yeah, I can trust this person, I can trust this teacher, I can trust Sir, Miss. That can be hard. Of course it can. We just struggle with the words ourselves. But I would always have a communal conversation with a colleague, just find out what have they done in that situation? What has helped you in this situation with a student, so that I can better support this student myself? Because we don't know everything. We don't. There's so many different strategies and tactics out there, so many different things. So if we don't learn from each other when we are each other's greatest resource, then we're going to struggle ourselves. So speak to colleagues, but I'd find that sort of mutual interest potentially, but just get interested in what the child's interested in. Find out what they love and enjoy, so that you can have that shared conversation with them, and that they actually have something that they're happy to talk about that makes them feel good, so that they will feel like they're safe and valued, and they will open up then, that you can then better support them going forwards. Because if a child doesn't feel safe for whatever reason, they're not going to open up. They're not going to come talk to us. They're going to isolate, and the situation's going to get worse for them. So it's about trying to find that way in, so to speak, in a calm way, so that the child then feels that they are safe enough to be able to open up to somebody.
Beautiful. It really does sort of highlight the importance of our humanity. Just a human to human. What do you love? What are you interested in? Tell me about you like. I didn't know you liked doing that. Oh yeah, I go down at the weekends and do. Wow. And then straight away you've got that human connection. And you're right, because of course if they do isolate, we know that leads to depression and anxiety. We know that's something will really destroy any chance of them coming into their own and reaching out and asking for help, which I would still say now as an adult is definitely still a really tough thing to do. I think it's really hard to be able to do that.
And teachers don't ask for help. We are the worst for it.
Yeah, we've got a lot to learn, and we can learn a lot from these wonderful young people.
Yes.
Well, Tem, as much as I don't want to close this conversation, I will close for now. I'm sure we'll have more conversations in the future, but for now, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and guidance on Children's Mental Health Week. I really appreciate it, and I'm so happy to know that there are teachers like you out in the schools doing their absolute best for our fantastic kids and young people. And if you want to know more, if you are in education, then Tem has this wonderful Helping Teachers to Thrive, which is, she's waving the flag that I began many years ago myself. So please do get in touch with her. All the information about what she does will be connected in this technology somewhere. Thanks ever so much, Tem. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the amazing work that you do to help so many kids and teachers out there. Thank you. It's incredible. It's needed.
If you found this curious conversation helpful, the Inner Detective Journal might be just what you need. It's a gentle, powerful way to help young children build lifelong coping skills with kindness from within. Click the link to get your copy for your child, your class, maybe your entire organization if they've got children, so you can help them through the tough times. Let's keep listening and keep supporting children's mental health together.